Now, there's yet another study out there, once again showing how millennials have been screwed over by factors that we had no control over. Now, according to this new study from accounting group Deloitte, the net worth of the average 18 to 35-year-old had plummeted 34% since 1996. So, within those years, 18 to 35-year-olds have lost about a third of their net worth. That is awful. Now, the group's average net worth, according to Deloitte, is now below $8,000, putting today's millennials in a worse financial position than previous generations. Now, the study found that millennials pay more for education, food, transportation, and other basic needs while incomes have stayed steady. And there is a word for that. It is called stagnation. But Jeff, no, you don't understand. It's avocado toast. Or maybe it's because millennials must be lazy. They don't want to work and only want to stare at iPhones. No, turns out that's not it at all. No, here's the thing. Deloitte's researchers told the Washington Post today that the study's findings debunk many controversial wisdoms about the so-called new age consumer. He said the narrative out there is that millennials are ruining everything from breakfast cereal to weddings. But what matters to consumers today isn't much different than what it was 50 years ago. This according to Chief Retail Officer Casey Lobow said, talking to the Post. Generally speaking, she said, there have not been enough dramatic changes in how consumers spend their money. Now that's interesting. And so, but wait a minute. I thought millennials killed the napkin or Applebee's or whatever. No, it turns out that those changes are basically down to consumer taste. And so, and by the way, napkins still exist, and so does Applebee's. So do diamonds. So do a lot of these things. So, in reality, millennials haven't killed anything. But here's the thing. What exists now actually hadn't existed previously. And one of those things I'm talking about is student loan debt. And now, according to the Post, education costs have risen 65% in the last decade alone, more than any other category. Now, back in the 60s and 70s, college was actually incredibly cheap, allowing somebody with a part-time summer job to pay for their schooling. Now, that same summer job is unable to pay rent. In fact, there is no state in the union where you can work 40 hours at minimum wage, $7.25, and actually be able to afford housing. Oh, but Jeff, you understand. It's not those factors that are stopping you guys from, you millennials, from being able to live the American dream. No, you just have to stop spending so much on Starbucks, Maca Cappuccinos, or whatever. Yeah, that's it. It's all personal responsibility. Bootstraps. No, we've been getting bootstraps thrown at us our entire lives. But without fair competitive wages, you can't go anywhere. It's not, and besides, it's not that we're spending more than previous generations. It's just that we're dealing with less. The study found that discretionary spending, like eating out and alcohol, made up about 11% of total income, about the same as a decade ago. Now, the study also found that only 20% of consumers were meaningfully better off in 2017 than they were off in 2007, with little income left to spend on discretionary retail. So, again, discretionary spending, right? Like being able to go out and buy something new and help spur the economy is actually way down. Now, what happens in an economy where people don't have enough money to spend? Now, this economy, by the way, depends on consumer spending. Well, I'll show you what happens. You have an increase in credit card debt, which went up over by 1,000%. Slow economic growth, job losses, outsourcing, increasing economic inequality, stagnant wages, housing crises. I mean, the study found that many Americans aged 18 to 35 also put off major life milestones, which included buying homes, new cars, and starting families. And they do that because of immense financial pressure and lack of available income. So, for example, student loan debt plus a low income means you are not getting that house, you are not having those kids. So the effect of that, of course, spills over into the rest of the economy. Construction goes down. There's less people building new houses. And by the way, houses remain vacant, while ironically homelessness increases because people can't afford to live in those houses. On the social front, which is also important, you have, again, less marriage, less children being born, which has a long-term impact because it imperils future generations, since there won't be enough of a workforce to support an aging population. I mean, the impacts of losing most of an entire generation are actually pretty profound. I mean, look, I recently read an article in the Washington Post that said that, hey, if you want millennials to start getting married and having kids, then maybe we should fix these problems and actually make this a country where you want to raise a family in, or when you can afford to do so. Hey, conservatives, Republicans always complain and cry about the death of marriage and people not having families, people not having kids. Well, how about you fix your mess? Stop giving tax cuts to the rich and actually favor things like paid parental leave and Medicare for all and free college and increasing wages. Make it so that maybe having a family is not the difference between living and barely living and making it by to abject poverty and complete struggle. Because those are the choices for most people. Now, unfortunately, of course, we've got Republicans, neoliberal, corporatist Democrats that will probably not go in this direction. Because, as usual, those two are controlled by the donor class. And the donor class, they don't care about the future. They don't care about lost generations. All they care about is continuing to get more tax cuts for themselves so they can continue to hoard more and more wealth very obscenely. And that's what it is. It's absolutely obscene. Now, you want to fix these problems? We know how. We've got to tax the rich to do it. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a patreon.com/TYTNation set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.